Hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin officially ends today. Now, back in April and May, before the season began, NOAA predicted 12 to 18 named storms, with 6 to 10 becoming hurricanes, while Colorado State forecasters, who give specific numbers, predicted 16 and 9 respectively. Well, we ended up with 19 named storms, with 7 becoming hurricanes. The averages are 11 to 12 named storms and around 6 hurricanes, so the preseason forecasts did capture the idea that it would be an above-average season. Here's a look at the tracks of this year's storms, and though there were 19, very few of them directly impacted the U.S. The season got off to a strange start because none of the first 8 tropical storms became a hurricane, the first time on record that's happened. That streak ended in a big way in late August when Hurricane Irene brought strong winds and very heavy rains to densely populated areas of the Northeast, leading to catastrophic flooding, widespread power outages, and more than $10 billion in damage, making it by far the costliest storm of the year. The biggest tropical blow to Pennsylvania came less than 2 weeks later when the remnants of Tropical Storm Lee dumped more than 10 inches of rain on already saturated ground in much of the Susquehanna Valley, producing historic river crests at Wilkes-Barre and Bloomsburg and major flooding from the New York to the Maryland border. Today is also the official end of hurricane season in the eastern Pacific Ocean, which gets much less attention than the Atlantic, mainly because storms there tend to move away from land. But the eastern Pacific is usually more active than the Atlantic, averaging more than 15 named storms and almost 9 hurricanes a year. This year, there were only 11 named storms, well below average, but 10 became hurricanes, slightly above average. So it was a mixed message in terms of activity. The last hurricane was probably most notable. A week ago yesterday, on November 22nd, Hurricane Kenneth intensified into an impressive Category 4 storm with 145-mile-per-hour winds, making it by far the strongest hurricane to form so late in the season in either the eastern Pacific or the Atlantic. The closest in the Atlantic was Hurricane Kate, which attained 120-mile-per-hour winds on November 21st, 1985. Now, it's interesting to compare the number of hurricanes each year in the eastern Pacific to the number that form in the Atlantic. And that's what I've done here going back to 1966, which is when daily satellite images became available, and so statistics since then are most reliable. The eastern Pacific is in black here, the Atlantic is in green. And notice that most of the time up until the middle of the 1990s, there were more hurricanes each year in the eastern Pacific than in the Atlantic. But over the last 15 years or so, the Atlantic has been more or less on par with the eastern Pacific. Most research suggests this is part of a natural cycle in the Atlantic, where for a few decades at a time, higher water temperatures and reduced high-altitude winds make it easier for hurricanes to develop. The Atlantic has been in that part of the cycle for about 15 years now. Though the 2011 hurricane season is officially over, forecasters are already looking toward next year. The Colorado State team will issue their early outlook for the 2012 hurricane season next week. Paul Knight is back next with our extended forecast.